Good morning. I'm Jean Martin, a member of the Community Forum Committee of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Cleveland. The congregation has been doing these forums for more than 25 years. We organize them as a congregational service to the community to support personal reflection and social action and to encourage individual and collective growth. We welcome you all. Today, it's my pleasure to depart from the grim news we're all talking about and give you an uplifting subject, Cleveland public art outside the box. One day there were boring industrial buildings up and down Cleveland's Midtown corridor along Euclid and Chester. Then last summer, the facades of 20 buildings were transformed with colorful murals. A week-long celebration of activities open to the public followed. A few years ago, a spectacular light show greeted visitors in the lobby of the staid Federal Reserve Bank downtown, and photos from the Underground Railroad adorned the pews of St. John's Church in Tremont. These are among many examples of public art in Cleveland, free of charge. Public art is no longer just statues of dignitaries, and artwork on buildings is no longer necessarily considered graffiti. How do these things happen? Where are they? And who's responsible for these creations? Our speakers will tell you today. Before we meet them, I have a few housekeeping notes. We'll have about 30 minutes or so for speaker remarks, and then there'll be time for questions and answers. Please use the Q&A box to pose your questions. If you'd like to receive weekly email notifications of future forums, or if you have ideas for future topics and speakers, leave your email in the chat box or email forums@uucleveland.org. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Greg Peckham is the executive director of Cleveland's Land Studio, an organization that creates places and connects people through public art, sustainable building and design, collaborative planning, and dynamic programming. Greg joined Land Studio as part of the merger of the former Park Works and Cleveland Public Art, where he had served as executive director. Outside of Land Studio, Greg has been involved with Community Partnership for Arts and Culture, now Arts Cleveland, and other groups. Through his work with community groups, artists, and design professionals, he maintains a strong commitment to citizen participation in urban planning efforts. He has worked in community development and public education, and also served as a legislative assistant in the Ohio Senate. He holds a BA from the Ohio State University and a master's degree from Case Western Reserve University. Fred Bidwell is a graduate of Oberlin College with an art history major. He worked as a commercial and fine arts photographer and then changed his career to advertising. When he retired in 2012, he was executive chairman of JWT Ogilvy Action. In 2011, Fred and his wife Laura established the Fred and Laura Ruth Bidwell Foundation. Its major project is the Transformer Station, an arts and exhibition space that opened in 2013 in the Hingetown neighborhood near Ohio City. The Bidwell Foundation has a public-private partnership with the Cleveland Museum of Art in lending the Transformer space for contemporary arts exhibits. Fred was interim director and CEO of the museum in 2014 and holds other community board positions. In July 2018, he launched Front International, Cleveland Triennial for Contemporary Art, a region-wide contemporary art exhibition. After a COVID hiatus, it will return this July through October. He is the exhibition's executive director. We welcome you both. Greg, I will turn the mic over to you first.
All right, thank you so much, Jean, for that introduction and for the invitation to be here with everybody. Always good that Fred and I get to do these things together. I'm gonna share my screen. hopefully really quickly here. Let me know if that's, is that coming up for everybody? Fred, give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. Thank you. So again, my name is Greg Peckham. I'm the director of Land Studio. I'm going to talk just for a minute or two about our organization and what we do. I'm going to talk in general about sort of the sort of landscape of public art in Cleveland, and then a couple examples of initiatives that we are working on. And then I'll turn it over to Fred to talk about Front International. So this is us, Studio. It's LAND is an acronym for the 4 areas that are sort of the pillars of our work: landscape, art, neighborhoods, and development, and how those things sort of stitch together to create vibrant public places. And as Jean mentioned, our goal is really about connecting communities and using art and public spaces as the tool to do that. We believe in the power of art and public space to transform and unite Cleveland. We think that these are tools for bringing people together, for connecting people, and for making more sort of complete communities. And we use these tools of art and public space to try to do that. We do a lot of different types of things, but in the end, the product that people see out on the street, we hope is very vibrant public art that tells a story about place, and great public spaces where people feel welcome and they want to come together, they want to join together, they want to meet, they want to celebrate, they want to have fun. And our projects range from things that could be as large as the $52 million redevelopment of Public Square that we led for over a decade, to small neighborhood projects that maybe last for a weekend or for a couple months. And so it's that really sort of spectrum of of opportunities that exist, and the big projects and the small projects together kind of create this beautiful sort of layering of sort of impact on neighborhoods across the city. And our role is really to be a catalyst, to be a convener, and to be a collaborator. So our job is about managing a wide range of public art projects and cultural programming across the city. So we're based in the Ohio City neighborhood, but we serve the entire 77 square miles of the city of Cleveland. And as Jean again mentioned, we do that through bringing people together and involving them in the decisions about that shape their neighborhoods and shape the places that they live. We partner with institutions. We work a lot with Front International. We'll talk about some of the other organizations that we work with. But we partner with institutions and developers to make sure that public art and public space are integral to their projects. We are advocates for creating public spaces and artwork in civic investment. So if there are large public projects that are happening around our community, we want to make sure that artwork and artists are a part of shaping those designs and being very sort of central to those. And we work a lot with connecting local artists with opportunities, and we'll talk a little bit about those things as well. So just to sort of strip it down to, and maybe we'll get into a little bit of a conversation about this as we go forward, but what is public art? This is the most basic of definitions. It's any kind of art placed in public places where everyone can enjoy it. I think that's what Jean started with, is that this is really about breaking down barriers and making sure that every person has access to art in their everyday life. So I thought I'd do a really quick snapshot of public art in Cleveland. And I think, part of the reason that I and others in our office really love this work is that in Cleveland, there's really something for everyone. Doesn't matter what your taste is, doesn't matter what your inclination is. There are the great sort of landmark pieces of public art, whether the Guardians on the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge, or the old guys in the statues, the classic type of thoughts about what public art is. We have wonderful examples of all these things. We have examples of the 70s and the 80s where government commissions and corporate commissions were creating these large scale kind of landmark pieces. We all know the free stamp down next to City Hall and the Noguchi sculpture. These are sort of pieces that are of a period in time. We also have some really, really wonderful examples of I think where landscape art, architecture, and design come together. Places like Lakeview Cemetery, which was obviously designed as a cemetery, but as a place, for the living to celebrate and to come and to, to see beautiful sculpture mixed in with landscape. And I think one of my favorites, the Cleveland Cultural Gardens, which is, about a 2-mile public art project that celebrates the, incredible diversity of people who have made up this city, and it continues to grow year after year. And I think is one of the most impressive kind of collections of both public art, landscape design that are all really woven into a single experience. It's quite unique in the country. And then we have some of the more modern things that we're seeing happening today that are, a little bit more playful. There's on the bottom right is a piece that came out of Front International a few years ago, the Judy's Hand, which is a very whimsical kind of piece, but has become a landmark in its own right out at Case Western Reserve in the plaza in front of MoCA. And as Jean alluded to, Cleveland is growing a really, really impressive collection of street art. That this is the picture on the top left is from the Cleveland Walls Festival that Jean mentioned at the beginning. We commissioned 21 artists along with Midtown Cleveland to create new large-scale works of public art in buildings all throughout the Midtown neighborhood. And the idea was Midtown not being just a pass-through place between downtown and University Circle, but really starting to have its own sort of vibrancy and its own identity, and using public art as a way to do that. I thought I'd take a second to talk about a couple different projects that we're involved with right now. The first is the Landform Program, which is a public art program for downtown Cleveland that we started in 2016. People will hopefully not remember too much that this is what Public Square used to look like. And over a period of more than a decade, our organization, along with many others, led an initiative to transform Public Square into what it is now. A really sort of, fantastic front door for the city of Cleveland, where people can come together. And as we started working on that, one of the questions was not just building the park, but how are you going to activate the park over time and make sure that it remains vibrant, and what can we do? So we got some wonderful grants from the Fowler family, among others, and we initiated a program where every year, throughout the course of the year, we commission different artists to create new art projects that activate the spaces. So I'm just going to flip through a handful of examples of these things that have really been about bringing sort of new sort of experiences and activities into Public Square. So we commission local, national, and international artists to create new works of temporary art. One of the signature spaces in the square is we designed into the back of the cafe there, what we call the art wall. And this has become a site where we really feature the work of new emerging artists, and particularly artists of color, to create their first work of public art. And it really gives folks a platform of the most highly visible public spaces in the city to showcase their work. And so it's able to have the work of photographers, of painters, graphic designers, illustrators. And it has really become a place that has become a springboard for a lot of these young artists to get their first opportunity to work in public spaces and have it be at a really elevated location like Public Square. This is named Marissa, who went on to do work for Vogue in France right after she did this project. Leonardo Castello, his first ever is a graphic designer piece, large-scale public work in Public Square. Alexandria Couch, a young woman who's an artist out of Akron, her first ever large-scale public piece. And then the Landform Program became so successful and positive for Public Square that we began to grow it outside of the square and into other public spaces that were underutilized in the city. So this is on Mall B. One of the interesting things in Cleveland is that as the downtown residential population is growing, there is more than 1,000 kids under the age of 14 in downtown Cleveland, and there's not a single playground. So we thought, could we introduce sort of artful play elements into the landscape of downtown? This is a proposal by a group called Chauza out of Brooklyn. And these are some of the sort of climbable, playful sculptures that they created that are on display right now outside of the Hilton Hotel, and they'll be there. And the idea is really, how can we use these sort of artful experiences as a way to introduce play into our city and really support the development of the city as a place that young families want to live and stay and put down roots. Another example of expanding that program off of the square, this is a project that was just completed last summer by a Cleveland artist by the name of Darius Stewart at the Cleveland Public Library, a series that he had never done three-dimensional sculpture. He's a painter by training. We worked with him to transform his drawings into three-dimensional sculpture. So you see there, sort of these were his original drawings. And we worked with a local fabricator to turn those into sculptures in the Eastman Reading Garden, which is really sort of a wonderful way to sort of elevate his trajectory as an artist and where he's going to take his work. This is Darius with his son sitting next to a sculpture of his son. So really, these are about his telling his story of his kids and his family and their life in Cleveland. Another area that we're working, which is at the that I'm sharing with you at the very early stages, is called Elevate the East. And the reason I'm showing this is this is a very resident-driven public art initiative. It's in the Buckeye, Woodhill, and Mount Pleasant area of Cleveland on the near east side of the city. And this was really as I mentioned, a resident-driven initiative to figure out how they could use public art to celebrate and enhance the sort of quality of life and give voice to the communities. So this isn't something where you had an arts organization coming in and saying, hey, let's bring public art to your community. This is really about the community having its own ideas and opinions about how public art can be used as a tool for kind of celebrating and connecting art and people in their neighborhoods. So this community-driven process identified 50 different locations where public art would have an impact in their neighborhood. They talked about the different types of things that they would like to see there. They talked about different themes that could be used to be expressed at these different locations throughout the neighborhood. So I'll just share with you some of these. These are neighborhoods that have a perch out to downtown Cleveland. So they talked about ways to elevate that view and to really celebrate that view. They talked about engagement of residents, that not just putting artwork out into the streets, but really how residents are part of it. They talked about the importance of local artists being a part of it. People feeling valued and inspired, African-American identity. You can see these things. So these are all ideas and themes and priorities that emerged out of the neighborhood themselves. And then they will be expressed as artists are commissioned to create projects. These are really the values that will be drivers of those, of the projects that materialize over time. So as I mentioned, this is early days. We are working as an implementation partner. So we're working side by side with Burton Bell Carr Development Corporation, which is the community development corporation in this neighborhood, to help try to be a driver to help these projects that have been identified, prioritized by the neighborhood, how we help to bring them to reality. And then the last thing I'm just going to share with you, this is, again, very early days during the pandemic. We were trying to encourage folks to get outside and experience the city and look at public art. We created this social media initiative called The City is Our Museum, saying, our museum is bigger than, no offense to the Cleveland Museum of Art, it's bigger than the Cleveland Museum of Art. It's got everybody in it, and the city is in fact our museum. And we really encouraged people to go out and to explore and to highlight places and artwork that they thought was vibrant and was exciting to them. So we're looking at art and architecture and public space, and how can we sort of capture that and get people to think about their city as a museum that's always open, it's constantly changing, and it's theirs to shape. So we got such a positive reaction to that, that we were able to get some funding to create an app called The City is Our Museum. We have not launched it publicly yet, but I'm sharing it with you guys. You can download this in the App in the Apple Store. In April, we are going to launch it publicly. We are starting with 4 different tours of neighborhoods around the city. And over the next year or so, we will have about 10 to 12 different tours that really give people a guide to exploring neighborhoods and the public art and public spaces, art and architecture that makes these different places really exciting places to visit. So we encourage you to check it out. You can download it now. It's still in its, we're getting close to being ready to launch it, but it's going to be a great way for the community to explore public art around the city. So I will stop there, and I will stop there and stop my share, and I'll turn it over to Fred. Thanks.
Great. Let's see. Just looking for my. This is what I want. No, it's not. Hold on. Ah, I see what the problem is. Just have to open. Here we go. All right, is everyone seeing that? Great. Thank you, Greg. Land Studio is a tremendous resource for our city, and in fact, Front International probably wouldn't be possible without the partnership that we have with Land Studio. So it's a real privilege to work with them, and knowing what resources are in other cities, its land is really quite unique. I'm here to talk about Front International, Cleveland Triennial for Contemporary Art, which launched in 2018 with this theme, An American City. It was an inauguration of a really pretty unique idea. And in fact, people are still asking me, well, what is a triennial anyway? This is sort of a novel concept for the United States, for North America, in fact. And so I'm going to go back and with a little bit of history. Where did this all come from? It came from Venice in 1895. Venice in 1895 was not the glitzy tourist destination so much that it is now. It was a bit down at the heels, tired, some smelly canals, and I think the city fathers of Venice realized there needed to be something done to revitalize the city. So they conceived in 1895 this very novel idea. Let's do a World's Fair of Art. They had a lot of empty real estate. Does that sound like Cleveland? And they had an opportunity to repurpose what was basically a former Army and Navy arsenal into a fairground for contemporary art. Fast forward over a century later, the Venice Biennale our biennial is one of the most prestigious art events in the world. It attracts hundreds of thousands of people to Venice every 2 years, to amazing exhibitions in its sprawling campus, but the art spreads all over the city. In every nook and cranny, dozens of palazzos, empty buildings, shops, even into the canal. So it creates this sort of spectacular civic experience. Well, this doesn't really happen so much in the United States. Most of us think of the big art events as something like Art Basel. Well, Art Basel is not free, and it's really basically a trade fair. Nothing wrong with selling art, don't get me wrong, but that is not what a biennial or triennial is, and it's certainly not what Front is. Another good example is an event called Documenta that happens in a town named Kassel in Germany. Not too many people know about Kassel. It's not a very big town, about the size of Akron, central Germany. Kassel was essentially bombed to the ground during the war. Most of its cultural heritage was essentially leveled. But a group of artists and civic leaders got together in the 50s and saw this as an opportunity to reposition Kassel as a place more forward-looking, a place that could be a center to celebrate contemporary art. So they developed this citywide exhibition called Documenta. What you're seeing here is this amazing piece of public art they created in 2017, a life-size reproduction of the Acropolis made entirely out of books. This is sort of the scope and the scale of these, what was a temporary work of public art. Documenta happens every 5 years in this case, and it features public art that is spread all over the city, as well as exhibitions inside institutions and buildings across the city. And the city itself is branded as Documenta. It's really a thing the entire community celebrates, and it's everywhere. And every 5 years, over 1 million people come to visit Kassel. So my thought was that if Kassel can do this, Cleveland can do much better. This is a great opportunity, we felt, for Cleveland to showcase its incredible legacy of cultural institutions and vibrant artistic community to the rest of the world. So Front International Cleveland Exhibition for Contemporary Art is a region-wide 3-month contemporary art festival. It's a triennial, happens every 3 years. We were launched in 2018, and we're opening our 2nd edition this summer. Yes, it's a triennial, but we took a 4th year this time for a COVID year. But we'll be launching this summer our next show titled "Oh Gods of Dust and Rainbows." And our purpose is to generate new economic activity by leveraging our cultural assets to enhance the brand of Cleveland and Northeast Ohio as a cultural and intellectual hub, and to develop an even stronger and more vibrant, more sustainable creative community right here in Cleveland. Now, Front is really based on an unprecedented collaboration with what we call our presenting partners, which are the amazing institutions in our region: the Cleveland Museum of Art, MoCA Cleveland, Akron Art Museum, the Allen Memorial Art Museum, Spaces, Transformer Station, Cleveland Institute of Art, Case Western Reserve University, Cleveland Clinic, Cleveland Public Library. Cleveland, considering we're a mid-sized city, we swing way above our weight here. And by putting together a collaboration, we leverage those assets in a huge way. And let me tell you, it's a real testimony to the spirit of Cleveland that this collaboration exists, because there is no other city in the world that has put together this kind of a collaboration. Even in Europe, where biennials and triennials are common, they don't have anywhere near this depth of collaboration with the established public institutions. And Cleveland should be very proud of that. So, Front is a 3-month-long exhibition of contemporary art from around the world. And these are often new commissions that happen in our museums and outside in public spaces. Here's a work by the Spanish artist Marlon da Zambuja, which was installed in the Glassbox Gallery at the Cleveland Museum of Art. In 2018, we had 130 artists, 28 venues, 400 works of art, over a third of them created especially for the show, and in 3 cities in northeastern Ohio. Here's a masterpiece by Yinka Shonibari, which was created for Brett Hall and Cleveland Public Library. And Front was an outstanding success. Front venues had over 250,000 visits by 90,000 unique visitors in 2018. And it was truly an international cultural destination. Over 30,000 of those 90,000 visitors flew in from across the nation in more than 25 countries. Here is a wonderful animated video installation in the lobby of the Federal Reserve Bank building downtown Cleveland. An architectural treasure, which is sadly not visited too often by Clevelanders, but we brought a lot of people to see that amazing installation in that incredible environment. And Front is, even though it's an international exhibition, as its name implies, and many of the artists come in from around the world, Front is also very thoughtfully engaged in our community. One of our big projects in 2018 was to make possible the restoration of this architectural gem, the Madison, designed in the 60s by Cleveland's Ohio's first Black architect, Robert Madison. And he created this building for Cleveland's first consortium of Black doctors in Glenville. Working with the Famicos Foundation, we restored this building and used it, and it housed our artists, visiting artists, for the lead up and for the show in 2018. And when we were through with it, we turned it back over to the Famicos Foundation, and it's still a cultural center. It's the ground floor is the headquarters for Third Space Action Labs. So it was a major part of the revitalization of the East 105th Street corridor in Glenville, which continues to thrive. So Front was an amazing collective artistic experience, but it was also an important civic, had important civic impact. Cleveland State University was commissioned to do an economic impact study, and they measured a $31 million economic impact. For perspective, maybe the NBA All-Star game might have been close to 100 million, but it probably cost close to 100 million. And maybe not that much, but Front's $31 million impact came off of a $5 million investment. So extremely positive return on investment. Front generated over $38 million of positive public relations value for Cleveland and Cleveland arts institutions, which often get overlooked as people think of us as flyover country. In summer of 2018, we were not flyover country, we were destination material. The world noticed. ArtNet News called Front wildly ambitious. The Architectural Digest, with the debut of Front, this Rust Belt city shines anew. Smithsonian said it's a dialogue that contains all voices. Art in America called Front immensely important. And the New York Times called Front an artistic scavenger hunt with civic pride. And the Wall Street Journal, the next Venice? Cleveland steps up, the world's next hotbed for contemporary art. So we were incredibly proud and pleased to see that, we really put Cleveland on the map. And we changed careers for artists because Front and events like Front, which are commissioning new works of art, often more ambitious than would be created for a museum show, for instance, we changed careers of artists with highly praised commissions. This work by Dawood Bay, already one of America's most recognized and praised African-American photographers. He created this work, Night Coming Tenderly, for the St. John's Church in Ohio City. This was a breakthrough work for him, very different from his prior bodies of work. It was instantly recognized as a masterpiece. It has now traveled to major museums across the US and been acquired by major museums and collectors all over the world. The opportunity to not only share amazing works of art with the community, but to change career trajectories of artists in positive ways is an incredible privilege. And of course, we created iconic new landmarks for Cleveland. Tony Tassett's Judy's Hand Pavilion as an example, sort of in probably now one of Cleveland's great selfie spots. Judy's Hand Pavilion is actually a gigantic enlargement of Tony Tassett's wife, Judy Ledgerwood's hand. Judy is a painter, a renowned painter in her own right. And so literally this is the artist's hand. And I can't think of anything more appropriate to be on the campus of Case Western right next to MoCA Cleveland. So Front International 2022, it's coming this summer. And it's called Oh God, Oh Gods of Dust and Rainbows. One feature of Front is every 3 years. It's a new artistic team leading and guiding the exhibition, and a new theme, a new concept that unites all of the exhibitions of the show. Oh Gods of Dust and Rainbows has been developed by Prem Krishnamurthy, a renowned a designer, artist, writer, and curator based in Berlin. And Prem found this title from this couplet by Langston Hughes, who of course grew up in Cleveland. Oh God of dust and rainbows, help us see that without dust, the rainbow would not be. This is a show that's really about how art can help us survive trauma and even use trauma to create joy, to heal, to find a path forward. Now, this theme was really developed before the pandemic, before the murder of George Floyd. But I can't think of anything that is now more appropriate than Oh Gods of Dust and Rainbows. We've certainly experienced our dust, but coming out of the pandemic, Oh Gods and Dust of Rainbows will also be about joy, will be about rainbows, will be about art and the process of making art as a mode of therapy and a mode of healing. Front will open in July 16 and run through October 2nd. So a season long, there'll be over 70 participating artists from around the world, many of them world famous, over 25 exhibition venues, and supported by a very ambitious program of performances and concerts. So I want to urge you, join us on March 31st at MoCA Cleveland, where we will be announcing our 2022 artists, presenting partners and programs. The show begins at 4:30 and we have a lot of amazing news to share. And I'll just end with this little bit of teaser. Some of the things we're going to be announcing will be new public art for Cleveland. I can't tell you about it right now, but it has something to do with this picture and this location. So to create a little anticipation, please join us on March 31st and hear more about where Front is going this summer. So with that, I'll say thank you and I'll stop sharing. we can, there we go.
Thank you so much, Greg and Fred. It's really fun to hear about these exciting projects. And I've already downloaded the app, The City is Our Museum, on my phone. A great part of exploring this kind of art is that you have an excuse to visit neighborhoods you might not know about. So like if you go to the Transformer station, you can grab a sandwich from the Larder Deli, best sandwiches in town. It's just across the street. Or you can eat a meal at Doug Cass's new Amba restaurant, which is opening soon around the corner. Or if you go see the murals in Midtown, pick up some Italian groceries from Gus Gallucci's. It's now time for questions and answers. Remember to use the Q&A button, and please try to keep your remarks to questions, not comments. We'll recognize your question with your first name unless you choose the anonymous button. I'll now turn this over to Cliff Wire, who's handling the live stream from the church's fellowship hall, and Laura Imbornoni, who's zooming at home. They're members of our forum committee.
Thank you, Jean. And I also want to thank you for organizing this presentation. It's been so inspiring to hear you, Greg and Fred, speak today. And it makes me, and I imagine others, want to go all over the Cleveland area and look at public art. I'd like to start with a question from an attendee. The attendee says, what do you think is responsible for the ability in the Cleveland area to collaborate for these summer events? And the attendee says, in other words, do we have a greater ability in our community, the artistic elements and otherwise, to do this than other cities? Why is Cleveland stepping out like this? What makes that happen?
Well, I have a theory, maybe a couple of theories. One is that in major cities, coastal cities, often cultural institutions feel like they're in competition with each other, and they don't collaborate because they feel that, you know, every audience member that someone else gets is one that's taken away from them. I don't think we have that spirit here in Cleveland. You know, I think arts and culture here is all about an abundance of arts and culture, not a zero-sum game. And I think the other point is that most cities our size just don't have the high level of quality of institutions that we have. And so, you know, and perhaps that contributes to this feeling like we're not competing. Each of these institutions feels that they have a great position and place in their own right, and they're not threatened by other institutions. So I think that's, you know, it's maybe a combination of things, but maybe it's just, we're just Midwestern nice. But I'm very proud of it.
I'll add to that. I think in addition to institutions, you know, kind of working well together, I think that arts is seen as something that sort of adds value to other sectors. So if I think about the work that that we do and others do to sort of support community development, the arts are very much at a pivotal part or a central part of neighborhood vitality and revitalization. If I think about places, all of our hospitals here have active arts programs. The Metro Health Hospital has a very wonderful arts and health and arts and medicine program. The environmental places like the Cleveland Metro Parks really embrace art as part of enhancement of their experience. So not only are the institutions working well together, but arts is something that can kind of thread the needle and cross between sectors in a way that sort of elevates everybody. So I think that that's a really important dimension of the sort of collaborative spirit of arts and culture in Cleveland, is crossing sectors.
Agreed.
Oh, thank you both. And I'm wondering, Cliff, do you have a question here that you'd like to ask from Fellowship Hall?
Yes, given that art is in the eye of the beholder, who decides on the art that's installed in different diverse areas of Cleveland? In other words, do outsiders, elite, decide on what goes where, or do the people who will be seeing the art every day, 24/7, 365 decide, or are those at the table a mixture of outsiders, elites, and neighborhood residents?
Yeah, maybe I'll start, and Fred, you can jump in. I think that's a great question, and it's part of the reason that I wanted to include the Elevate the East example, because this question of who decides is a huge issue when it comes to public art, and there isn't one universal answer to that question. The Elevate the East as an example is really about residents and artists in communities helping to shape what they see as the future of those places. So it's not the Land Studios, it's not the the Front Internationals that are coming in. It's community coming together, articulating their vision, and then using the power of institutions like ours to be able to help execute on those ideas. That's a really a somewhat new way of approaching public art in Cleveland and in general. And it's a much more empowered way of doing it, because it really does get at this question that one of the guests asked about who decides. There are other examples. For example, the city of Cleveland has a public art program, a percent for art program. So anytime they're building a new recreation center, a new park, a new public building, it's required that 1.5% of that budget is set aside for inclusion of public art. So we manage that program for the city of Cleveland. They have a panel of 7 people who are representatives. They're Cleveland residents, they're architects, artists, and then who help to evaluate and judge and select the artists who are part of those projects. And each one also has 2 members that are community representatives that are brought into that decision-making process, who are residents of the neighborhood where the art project is going to take place. So there's a lot of different answers to that question, but I think more and more what we're seeing is that there's an expectation, rightfully, that the people who are going to be live most closely to the artwork have a very heavy voice in what that looks like, and how it happens. So the day of sort of plunking down some of those big sculptures that we looked at in the first, that's purely a mindset of the past. And I think we're going to see a much more inclusive and participatory process when it comes to who decides and where those opportunities where they land.
A couple of our attendees have wondered about collaborating with some of the other assets that Cleveland has. So they were asking about, what about musicians and connecting musicians with artful spaces and sounds? What about sports organizations? I'll add movement and dance. So what about collaborating with those? And I bet we're going to hear that's already happening a little bit.
Yes, I can address that a little bit. Front 2022 will have a very heavy emphasis in performance. So there'll be dance and other kinds of performance art as a big component of the show. Actually, Greg can probably comment more on things like collaborating with sports teams, but I would say, just as an observer, for instance, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse has done a marvelous job at commissioning not just famed artists from outside of Cleveland, but local artists, and really energized that public space in a very, very smart way. So yeah, to Greg's point, there's a real appreciation in the community that art is powerful and valuable.
Here's a question from an anonymous attendee. Do you ever work with elementary schools to engage teachers and students with art projects?
We work not on a regular basis, but on a project by project basis. If there is a school in an area where we're doing work that has an opportunity to involve students in it, we absolutely will do that. A few years ago, we were creating a large scale public mural that was across from Edgewater Park. And it was really the inspiration that the artist had for this was the glacial history of how the Great Lakes were formed. So we did a lot of work with the schools in the Gordon Square neighborhood, working with students and talking about how this artwork was inspired by the glacial history of the Great Lakes. So we do it really when the opportunity presents itself on a project by project basis.
Front is increasingly engaging with students. We launched a Youth for Front program where we're recruiting high school students to actually intern for us to help with our visitor experience work. And we have a full-time fellow at Cleveland Public Library who's working on with artists to develop programming in library branches that students who are there after school can participate in. Although it's not a central part of our mission, it's definitely a big part of our programming.
Now, here's a very interesting question, I think, from Patty. Patty observes that in New York, there's a fear that bringing art to lower income neighborhoods could cause gentrification and displace the existing very strong communities. In other words, encourage people of higher income to move into those areas perhaps, and maybe it would be discouraging for the people who are living there to be out and about. And so she says, I know that's a concern here in areas like West 25th and Hingetown. How is this a concern addressed in the Cleveland area?
Yeah, I think that's always a serious concern. And anytime you have neighborhood change, neighborhood improvement, there's a risk of displacement. But I can tell you as a resident of Hingetown that and an observer of the rest of Cleveland that I think it's important to remember we're a very different city than New York. New York has been crowded ever since its founding. Cleveland is a city that was built for population of 1 million people and now has less than 500,000. So a lot of the development and frankly the opportunity both for art and for growth is to fill in those empty gaps, the abandoned buildings, the empty lots. That is certainly what has happened in Hingetown. I think the work that Greg and the Midtown CDC has done in Midtown is a great example of that. This is about re-energizing underused neighborhoods. And the risk of displacement, I think, is really quite low. Sure, rents go up when neighborhoods improve, and that can create tension. But if a city cannot grow, it cannot survive. I think that thoughtful civic leadership, for-profits and nonprofits really work together in Cleveland to try and mitigate the damaging aspects of gentrification. Would you agree with that, Greg?
Yeah, and I would say, our approach when it comes, art and art alone is not going to, push a neighborhood in one direction or another. And I think that, our approach is really that the art is about elevating the voice and the expression of the people that are there. And so that the artwork that becomes created through our organization and others is an expression of the people who are in those places. If not that, then it's not successful. It's not welcome. It's not what Land Studio thinks should be happening in a particular neighborhood. It's how we are a tool for the neighborhood to express itself. And so I think that there are a lot of factors that, above and beyond the enhancements that art can make to a neighborhood that really are the drivers behind those bigger questions of gentrification and who invests where and those types of things. So I think done properly, public art is a tool for bringing expression and voice of the community at a moment in time. And we do accept and expect that communities change over time. And that way, I think that the artwork sort of evolves along with the place, or it becomes a marker of a point in time. And so I think that there's a lot of different ways, but I would again say, I don't necessarily think that art and art alone is going to kind of, fundamentally flip the paradigm of any neighborhood in Cleveland at any moment in time.
Speaking of neighborhoods and communities, what about the suburbs? What's happening in the suburbs with public art?
I think what we're seeing, and from a mission standpoint, our work is really centered on the city of Cleveland. That's where our focus is. From time to time, we will work with different. We've done some work with Shaker Heights. We've done some work with other sort of adjacent communities, but we stay focused on Cleveland. But I think that what we're seeing is that a lot of communities, not just suburban communities in Cleveland, but across the country, people are seeing public art as an investment that helps to bring vitality, brings pride to their neighborhood. So even if you think about places like Crocker Park on the west side, or the Van Aken district in Shaker, those are all places where they're engaging artists to help enhance the experience of coming to those places. So I think that, and Lakewood is another great example of a city that's really starting to embrace public art as a part of the fabric of of their city, and it's part of the quality of life that people are starting to expect. So I think this is it's not a city or suburb thing. I think it's an everywhere thing, and people are seeing that artists really have something unique to bring to the identity of communities.
Okay. We have a question here. Just thinking here, can art and community gardening be integrated?
Let's see, I see that one too. The art and community gardening, can they be integrated? The very generative integration, in my opinion. This is from EOJB, sorry.
I think there's definitely ways that can happen. Actually, an artist that was part of our 2018 show did work with the Ohio City Community Garden, developed actually a special sausage and worked, installed a community oven at the community garden for everyone to use. The great, wonderful thing about contemporary art and contemporary artists is they work in all kinds of non-traditional ways. So, collaborating with gardeners, with farmers, sort of literally any sort of industry or enterprise is possible. And I think that's actually one of the wonderful things about contemporary art, is that it can cut across sort of all levels of society and all kinds of activities.
One of our attendees is wondering if artists have been affected by the COVID pandemic, and also your organizations. What was that like navigating through that time, or through even now, I guess?
Yeah, I think, artists certainly have been affected in huge ways. They're whether you're performing artists, visual artists, people have been hit, and these are folks, many of whom don't have the sort of economic kind of support system underneath them. They're the definition of the original gig workers, right? So a lot of artists have been really impacted by it. For our organization, we had a pipeline of probably 2 years worth of projects that were derailed. We could not, the city of Cleveland wasn't issuing building permits. We had fabricators in cities across Cleveland and around the country who were shut down. So, our microcosm of an of an economic system really was kind of derailed for a good 2 years. We were very fortunate, as I think Front was as well, that a number of the federal, state, local, and federal support systems, the relief systems and grants, we were able to take advantage of those, which helped to really sort of kind of support our organization during the time. In the first 6 months of COVID, we lost $500,000 in revenue that we were relying on. So it was real and it was fast. And it was really because of those government support programs that we were able to rebound. And I will say that, organizationally, we're very fortunate, but artists did not have that kind of, economic support system underneath them. So many artists were in very bad shape as a result of COVID.
Just to underline that, it's been devastating for the artistic community, and the damage continues, honestly. So it's a serious concern. Yes, Front, like Land, has had generous support, and I think partially because a lot of funders have seen the damage and have seen Front, for instance, as a very important part of the recovery, to essentially re-energize and reintroduce arts and the community to arts and culture. Yes, the COVID impact has been serious, but I have a lot of optimism that the artistic community is very resilient, and the broader community is hungry to get back together again, share ideas, share creativity, and celebrate art and culture.
This is a good time for Abigail's question. Is there a way to contact artists directly to hire for an event or creating a piece of art for someone? What are ways to contact artists, local artists?
There's absolutely great resources. I'll point you to the Assembly for the Arts, which is our local arts council, for lack of a better word, which maintains a directory of artists all across Cuyahoga County. I'd also direct you to Collective Can Journal, Collective Arts Network, which is a quarterly arts journal, which is an incredible guide to the galleries and artists that are just all over Cleveland. That book gets thicker and thicker with every issue. And it's really an amazing resource to get to the incredible creatives that live here in Cleveland.
It looks like you guys are putting things in chat. Is that correct?
I just dropped 2 links. One to Fred's point, Can Journal. I dropped that in the chat. And also there's another resource called the Cleveland Artists Registry, which Fred was very involved in creating, where artists can you sign up, you can download your portfolio, and it's it's sort of a hunting ground for artists. So you can go there and look and sort of see people's work, and it connects you directly to the artist, kind of person to person. So I suggest that folks go there and check that out as another resource.
You mentioned in the presentation the history of public art associated with Italy, and Ken comments, in the city of Florence, Italy, the Medici family supported the arts, and there's all kinds of outdoor forums. So Ken says, thank you for bringing this tradition of public art to the 21st century here in our area. So we are, this area now is a part of this public art global community, would you say, or?
Absolutely. I think Cleveland is up can rate with any other major city in North America as a real destination for arts and culture. Great institution, great arts community, beautiful parks and facilities, and a great investment in public art. Thanks to organizations like Land.
And I would say, I think that what Fred is focused on is sort of helping to build the brand and the reputation of Cleveland, to a national and international audience. So you have, his team working on that scale. We're really working on the more localized neighborhood-based scale, and those two things really do, I think, a great job of complementing one another. That if Fred can bring people here from around the world or around the country to see the institutions and to experience Front, they're also then going to start to learn about our city, and they're going to explore it. And a big part of, one of the comments, the quotes that I love from Fred's press clippings is that sort of, it's a scavenger hunt throughout the city. And I think that that's what, what we're really working toward is that, this idea that the city is a museum and it's a constantly changing place, and artists are a part of that experience when you come to Cleveland. And we know that, it can be a little tricky to get people here, but once you get people to Cleveland, they're really blown away by what they see and what they experience. And I think what we're trying to do is be better storytellers to get that message out and make sure that people really understand that that's, what Cleveland has to offer from a kind of civic arts standpoint.
I think we have time for a couple of more questions. And I'm wondering, Cliff, if there's any question that you have there from Fellowship Hall at all.
We got one here. How frequently is performance space created in the Cleveland communities where artists can perform outdoors?
I couldn't put a number on that, but my sense is that that's happening more and more often. Of course, COVID has been a huge problem for performance of any kind for the past 2 years. But outdoor performance is going to be a key part of Front. Actually partnering with the Cleveland Museum of Art, we're going to have 4 world music concerts in front of Transformer Station this August. If you haven't visited that series called Ohio City Stages, please come out and enjoy it. It's where a couple of thousand people just get up and dance and enjoy the great weather in the urban environment. There are dozens of these wonderful neighborhood-based festivals and performances that dot the city. And one of the things that I think the Assembly for the Arts is trying to do over time, along with the city administration, is to make those public art and performance experiences easier to find and easier to produce.
I think that one of the most impactful things from your presentation today was the support you offer local artists and artists in general. And the young artists, you talked about young artists who aren't quite established, and then established artists expanding what they do. Like, I believe the story was about Darian doing one kind of art and then moving into the 3-dimensional, so I'm just wondering, for the two of you, what is that like for you to be such a source of support for new artists, emerging artists, and established artists?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the example, Darius Stewart, that had the installation at the Cleveland Public Library, and I think he is a great example. And I would say nothing makes us more, excited and proud and, energized than to be sort of a bit of a springboard in people's artistic careers. We had gotten to know Darius. He's an unbelievable watercolor painter. He just does really remarkable work. we were working on a project with Fred, actually, called the Inner Urban, which is a series of large-scale public art murals that were between the Cleveland Airport and downtown Cleveland along the Red Line train. And we had gotten to know Darius as a painter, and we said, how would you like to do a mural? And he said, I've never thought about working at that scale. And we have people on our staff who they're artists themselves, but what they really know how to do is how to help another artist think about evolving their work into a different dimension. So Darius did that first mural. He's gone on to do several other large scale murals. And as we had been, just getting to know him and working with him, and we said to him, how would you like to do, take this off the page, off the paper, and make it into something in 3 dimensions? He said, I don't think that I would know how to do that. And we said, we'll figure it out together. And we found a firm called Graphite Building and Design that we're actually working on a project for Fred with Front in Toledo. And they made 3-dimensional models of his work in clay. And he was just, it just opened up a whole new universe for him. And so for us to be a part of that is just so satisfying to see that we can help an artist who has infinite possibilities sort of grow into new areas. And Darius will go on, and he would have been fine without us, but I think it's just opened up new possibilities. And that's what we see as a great potential for our organization, is to use the skill sets, the tools, and the access that we have to help artists do things that they never really would have thought that they could do themselves. So that's such a satisfying and joyful part of what we get to do.
And it's a serious commitment for Front. What Front brings to local artists is access to the world artistic community by bringing world famed artists to Cleveland, but also providing local artists a platform to really expand their horizons beyond Cleveland. One of the things we'll be announcing on March 31st is a major fellowship program targeted at Black and Brown artists of Cleveland to give them national and international exposure. Part of our sort of unspoken goal for Front is to see if we can make a handful of Cleveland artists world famous. That would be an incredible achievement for us.
You know what? We're almost out of time here, but we just had these 2 questions that I think we really want to ask, and so I'll ask them both at the same time. How can you publicize the art walks coming this summer? Where can we find out about them? And then the second question is, will the Wednesday performances in front of the Art Museum continue this summer? So those are both summer questions.
Well, I can certainly say that the concerts in front of Transformer Station will happen this summer, be a big part of our the Front experience. They'll be in August, every Wednesday in August. So mark your calendar. Certainly Front will be doing a number of things to encourage people to go on that scavenger hunt that Greg mentioned. There'll be a free exhibition guide with maps. In fact, we're creating a little bit of a scavenger hunt of our own to reward people to go to the many venues at Front. And Transformer Station will be our exhibition hub, and we'll encourage everyone to start their journey there and learn about what kinds of itineraries they can take, whether they've got an afternoon, a day, or 3 days to see everything that we've got to offer.
Thanks. It's time to turn this back over to Jean Martin.
Thank you so much. You've really inspired us to get out and see art all over the region. It's been just great. And I just want to tell a quick story about Darius. My husband is an artist and did Wednesday night drawing at CIA for years. Darius was in high school when we first met him, and he jokes that my husband taught him how to draw. My husband would like to take credit for that. Thanks also to our question moderators and to our audience, because the discussion that follows from your questions really completes our program. This forum has been recorded and it will soon be available with past forums on the forum page of our website, uucleveland.org. Next Sunday at 9:30 will be our final forum of the season. Tune in on Zoom or come to the live streaming in Fellowship Hall for our presentation discussion on how fracking causes radioactivity in brine that is used to de-ice Ohio's roads. The speakers will be Cheryl John Cox, who is the fossil fuels organizer, Sierra Club, and Ted Auk, PhD director, Frack Tracker Alliance, Great Lakes Program.
Plug this in.
We
Yeah,
invite all of you inside our
It's out.
congregation sanctuary.
Put it back in
It comes in.
for that moment.
Could you
It's
mute
here, and
yourself?
then It doesn't.
Uh,
Or your
21600 Shaker Boulevard, and Belvoir Oval in Shaker Heights. Please wear a mask. If you can't join us in person, you can watch the live stream by going to uucleveland.org and clicking on the YouTube icon, or you can see us on our Facebook page, Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Cleveland. We appreciate your continued support and look forward to seeing you March 27th on Zoom at home or the live streaming in Fellowship Hall for our forum on fracking, radioactive brine, and icy roads. Enjoy your day, and I'd like to say happy spring.